Welcome. It has just gone 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Wednesday, the 12th of March, and you're watching episode 162 of Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap, providing an insight on the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode, CopperString, or Strung Along, is my guest, Mount Isa Mayor, Peta MacRae, who will be joined by Community Services Director, Chad King. Peter arrived in Mount Isa from Central Queensland in 1997 as a teacher and has embraced the outback community life ever since. As a wife, mother and businesswoman, she has strived for self-improvement and success in all areas of her endeavour and firmly believes you get back what you put into things. And the harder you work, the luckier you are. Peter has worked in many positions within the education of Queensland and has been involved in many community groups such as Quimby Radio Committee, Zonta, and Commerce Northwest. And more recently, is the chair of the Country University Centre Mount Isa Board. She has also served as a councillor for Mount Isa for 8 years, occupying the portfolio of sport and recreation, tourism and events, youth, community engagement, the pool and the library. Her passion for local government has led her to further studies, including the Australian Institute of Company Directors course and an MBA. As Mayor Peter's priorities for the local area are strengthening the economy through encouraging diversity of businesses, growing our own through educational opportunities and professional development, and creating an appealing and livable city to attract residents and visitors alike. She believes Mount Isa has a bright future as a leading regional city and is determined to advocate for the people of the Northwest and creating a lifestyle and opportunities they deserve while living in what has been an economic powerhouse of the state and country. Welcome, Peter and Chad.
Thanks very much, Bill. I probably need to update that bio and make it a bit more punchy.
I can only work with what I get.
It was lengthy, sorry.
Yeah. Just before we start, maybe Chad can just introduce himself in regards to a little bit about his background.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. And it's lovely to be with you here today on Regional Wrap. Look, mine's a little more concise. I'm the Director of Community Services here at the Mount Isa City Council. My accountabilities include some of the frontline services, right through to our economic development portfolio, strategy and policy. So I've got a really interesting but challenging portfolio there, an amazing team, some really hard workers, and more importantly, a team that's really well engaged and passionate about Mount Isa and about how we can help to chart its future. And I think some of that is what we're going to cover off today.
Well, the reason I contacted Peter in the first instance was basically the closure of the Glencore copper mine, and also the fact that you pretty well promptly within a couple of months put out a plan to address some of those things. And more recently, we've had a bit of conversation in the media and that about the progress of the CopperString, which a lot of people through the Northwest are pinning a fair bit of hopes on. So maybe we can start with Peter and just give us a bit of a lead into regards to Glencore and how long it's been in the wind before they actually made their final announcement of the closure, and how the community's dealt with it since.
Yeah, I guess there'd been talk for a lot of years about end of life of mine, but it was quite a shock when it was announced, I think October 2023, that they intended to close in July this year, so 2025. So yeah, the council, I guess, invested heavily in plans on how we could diversify and transition our economy. I mean, we had been looking in that way for quite a period of time, but we probably hadn't got as far along as what we should have in my opinion. We were also at that time working with Next Economy on developing our future-ready economy roadmap. So we really expedited that process. We invested heavily into consultants because when we looked at other communities that had faced similar structural adjustments, there's just not a good scenario unless you manage it proactively. So I guess council tried to get on the front foot and deal with the situation as best we could. And I think we've done a pretty good job, to be honest.
I suppose one thing that will be right at the forefront is the effect on how you service the community. So, Chad, I suppose your area is going to be fairly well impacted in regards to there'll probably be a change in regards to the amount of money flowing through the area when this happens, and also that impacts on revenue for the council, and that impacts again on delivery of service. So, in that regard, how's your area been looking into what has to be rejigged for going forward?
That's a really great question, Bill. And you're right that when we have bumps in the road, we need to look at service delivery. As Peter mentioned, as soon as this announcement happened, we pretty much kicked into gear. Interestingly, 4 months prior to the announcement, council had gone through a process and had adopted a new economic strategy. And it touched on this key idea of diversification and the need for our local economy to become more resilient in order to deal with the boom and bust cycle of mining, but also recognizing that mining is a key part of what this region does. It just so happened that when the mayor and the CEO got the phone call, we were expecting some sort of discussion about the smelter, but it happened to be the underground copper operations, which employs probably somewhere around twice the amount of the smelter. So to your question around what does that look like for service delivery, we've done quite a lot of work around modeling and understanding what is our unit rate costing, how can we be more efficient and effective, and what does that look like over time. But we almost need to walk and chew gum at the same time. So whilst my team's dealing with the macro of what does diversification of the economy look like, and how do we attract new investment, how do we make this region more resilient, the operations still continue on, and we strive to be as efficient as we can.
That brings to the point in regards to most people realise that you eventually a mine doesn't have infinite resource. It's going to come to an end somewhere along the line. Just as a matter of interest, in regards to mining in the area, is there still a reasonable amount of exploration for other activities and that in mining, or has all that geology part of it been mapped out, and pretty well what the reserves of the different minerals are within the greater area of Mount Isa?
So the Northwest Minerals Province, which Mount Isa is centre to, is home to an estimated $680 billion worth of minerals and rare earths. So we're absolutely open for business. There's hundreds of millions of dollars each year is spent in our immediate region on exploration, and there's lots of smart people figuring out where should their capital flow to unlock new projects in the region. As you would have seen from some of the media that we've put out from our future economy roadmap, Mayor MacRae has been talking about how we need to provide critical infrastructure to unlock new investment. And that's not just a buzzword, but that's the reality of what's happening on the ground. Council is leading the way in terms of investment attraction, so that those key minerals which the economy needs and the global economy needs are being not just pulled out of the ground, but value added here in Mount Isa. To give you a bit of a parallel, Bill, we think about some of the geopolitics and some of the challenges that are going on at the moment. The US imports around $200 million worth of rare earths every year. 70% of that comes from China. So with the current winds blowing the way they are, Mount Isa offers a great opportunity for a stable source of rare earths, the ability to process on shore, and not only to provide for our key partners like the US, but also to shore up our own sovereign capability. So coming back to the question, is there much to mine out? Is there much to mine in Mount Isa? Absolutely, there is.
Mining is what we do. It's our past, it's our future, and that's what most of our industry is based around. So we were talking with a proponent last week, and their economic forecast is to spend about $1 million on exploration next year. And our understanding is most of the tier 1 miners have leases here and are exploring in the area as well.
That leads me into the thing in regards to the roles of local government, state governments, and federal governments in basically preempting the infrastructure to allow for the economic growth. Because my view, especially, I mean, I don't come from Queensland, I'm West Australian. I've only been up here for 12 years now. But I get the impression that the state and federal government have got to be dragged and kicking to actually build good infrastructure to enable the economic development of regional Queensland. And by that I mean you still got, your roads are not 24, all year weather roads. You expect to be knocked out for 6 to 8 weeks just about every other year from flooding events. You can expect bridges to go down. You can expect your power to be cut for a long time, and the forward monies in regards to the provision of infrastructure and even critical infrastructure like water seems to be, lagging so far behind. So where are we up, especially in your situation with the state and federal government, at looking at your issues?
Yeah, we definitely need some visionary leaders that are nation builders the way they used to be, I think. We're pretty lucky with our road access. We don't get cut off all that often. Nothing like 6 or 8 weeks. Maybe you could expect a week a year. But our rail definitely does get cut, and that's where we need our investment. Because my understanding is that this is the only rail line in Queensland, ours, that has to wash its own face. It's not subsidised in any way. So the full costs are passed on to all the people using it. So it just makes the logistics expensive. We've got the most expensive power also in the country, if not the world, when it comes to looking at new projects. And it's doubly complex because with the power station here, we're not connected to the NEM at all, the National Energy Market, which is the whole point of CopperString. So proponents have to then go and negotiate their own gas price and then work with APA and then work out the charges to convert that gas into power. So it's quite a complex system for them to set up. And then if they go off grid and run diesel generators to create their power, as is what has been historically done to get projects up, they then are caught up in the safeguard mechanism and then have to pay tax. A new proponent that is looking at opening near Glencore down here that could potentially have 800 jobs by the end of the year to help our workforce transition, they're looking at an extra $10 million a year by being caught up in that safeguard mechanism. And that's essentially an extra tax.
I think it's, sort of telling in regards to if you go back to the Bianchi years. I mean, Cairns got its international airport. Townsville area got the Burdekin Dam, and the Central Queensland got the Galilee Basin rail system all organised and going. Then when Joe went away, we went back to one man, one vote system. What's happened is the power rests in the southeast corner. Now we've got 70 seats down there. The parties, if they want to win, they've got to do well there. So we seem to be forgotten in regards to investment. And it beggars belief, here it is, it's 2025, for heaven's sake, a quarter way through the 21st century. And the national grid hasn't been connected out to Mount Isa, which has been providing revenue for the state government and wealth for the nation as well. You've got Weipa, which is exporting bauxite, and it beggars belief that they haven't put the national grid up there and put smelters up there as well. We don't, like I say, we don't seem to have any visionaries in regards. Everything is waits till a situation develops and then they might look into it.
Yeah, we agree. We have this conversation a lot. We understand that a lot of the royalties that we produce out here in the regions go to make, you know, places livable along the coast and in the southeast corner, and we fully appreciate that. But we feel that you know, a lot of the royalties need to be returned back to the regions if we're wanting to keep our population. Because without population here, the party's going to come to an end and we're going to have to stop producing. This is where all the skilled people are to do with mining. We just need to keep this population in place, but we need livability and we need jobs to keep them here.
I think the other thing is too, if if they don't look ahead in regards to providing infrastructure that develops things, you can't grow the pie. If you don't grow the pie, then there's not going to be more money for you to spend on education and things like that. So it's in their best interest is to invest in projects to grow the pie. But we don't seem to have that. I mean, if you look at spend 10 billion in Brisbane on a cross river rail, is it an asset or a liability? It doesn't generate any wealth. It's at 50-cent fares, they're never going to generate enough money for even the maintenance of it. So, in fact, it's a liability. It's money gone, and it won't generate anything. If you spent 10 million in the regions building dams, roads, electrification, and things like that, you actually go to get a return on it, I think. So this is where the philosophy has gone wrong in regards to the way things are set up.
I kind of think that the Cross River Rail, that is in a way nation building because it does allow them to take those cars off the road, and I fully appreciate that. I just wish we had the same vision out here and they could put that money into our rail as well to get all those triples off the road that are really dangerous for people using the highway, for our tourists and citizens, but also chopping up our roads because everything, as it gets taken off rail because it's too expensive, gets put straight into trucks and straight on our roads. And the minute it rains, those roads get a bit wet, they get chopped up, and it just costs more money to fix them. That money would be way better invested into rail.
I think that goes for across the whole regions because if you look at the rail from Brisbane to Cairns, I mean that was probably put in yonks ago, and it's still the same status. It's still only one track. I mean it gets washed out. It does carry a fair bit of cargo on that, but nothing to compare to what it could if it was actually upgraded properly. It would take a lot of pressure off the Bruce Highway. But we never seem to have that continuous development, even for the infrastructure we currently have, and that's a bit of a worry too.
I guess you might like to talk on this more, Chad, but like the costings that our consultants have all come up with is if we were to get $2 billion from the Future Made in Australia Fund, that would be enough to firm up the infrastructure that we need and to develop projects that will enable us to get that $680 billion worth of critical minerals out of the ground. It will attract the investment that we need. So, I mean, it's not a really big ask for return on investment.
When we started this process, quickly after the announcement, we started to map out and understand what's the region's competitive advantage, what are the barriers, and what sort of investment do we need to actually deliver on that promise of the Northwest Minerals Precinct, as the Mayor has touched on. And what we've realised is we've had to step into that space. So when we looked around to understand what planning been done for the region, there was a big question mark over Mount Isa. It was an assumption that Mount Isa exists and it services the region, but no one had defined what that city vision looks like, what its role is, and how it helps to deliver on that vision of the region. So our future economy roadmap now fills that gap, and it's sort of the guiding light for the way that we now undertake advocacy for selling the region and for delivering on our own plans. And a key part of that, as we touched on, is what infrastructure do we need to help get those minerals out of the ground? How do we help junior miners convert across to production mines? What tools can we put in place, like common user facilities, facilitating access to the rail, making the rail more resilient, but also thinking outside of our immediate area. Mount Isa's very close to the NT border, and even though we've got a line on the map saying this is the Northern Territory and this is Queensland, the minerals under the ground don't care about that. So some of our discussion recently has been around how do we work better with our counterparts across the border and advocate for this whole region, and make sure that we've got the right infrastructure in place and the planning in place, rather than just the parochial looking out for Queensland and looking out for our immediate region.
You just hit on the magic word, parochial. I come from West Australia. I joined the Defence Forces as an apprentice. Our apprenticeship group, there was about 70 in it. It was only half a dozen from West Australia, about 25 or something from Queensland, about 20 from New South Wales, 15 from Victoria, and odd few from Tasmania and New South Wales. And even that's going back to the 1970s sort of thing. And I could not believe how parochial Queenslanders were. They would fall off in different groups and join up with people from different states. But if you came from Townsville or somewhere, you didn't associate with someone from Mount Isa or Hewington. It was very, I mean, it was really strangely how parochial they were, and they didn't like people from Mackay. People from Townsville didn't like people from Mackay and Rockhampton and all that. It's very strange. But I also think that parochialism has really worked against regional Queensland, especially in the north. I think it's extremely important, like Townsville as the hub for the North Queensland corridor, and Cairns for far North Queensland. The free members in each of those areas don't seem to get the idea that they will do well if the service hub that they're feeding out to yours goes all the way, Hewington, Richmond, Cloncurry, out to Mount Isa, that corridor, and Cairns does, of course, far North Queensland. But they don't seem to get the picture in regards to you'll do better if your outer regions are also developing and sort of growing. But they are very self-centered in regards to, I mean, Cairns drives me nuts, and they're talking about tourism all the time. Tourism. That's fine. If you want your kids to grow up as baristas or bag carriers, great. But if you've got no industry, you've got no science, you've got none of that, there's not much for them. So it's more important that the outer regions do well, then you provide the service hubs, the evaluating process there. And I don't think you get the support from those controlling hubs in regards to the outer regions. Robbie seems to be a lone voice, for the whole this big area, Traeger, but we don't see the people from the members from Townsville jumping up in support of getting delivery for Mount Isa, which is the most important corridor for them.
You're 100% right, Bill, and we've identified and we're trying to quantify what this actual underground copper mine closure is going to cost Townsville. Because although that's 1,200 jobs from the underground copper mine, it'd be interesting to know what percentage of those are fly in and fly out, and what percentage are actually fly in and fly out of Townsville.
The other thing that still worries me is they should be looking right where they can deliver value added to anything you do out there. Fair enough, if you've got good cheap power out there, there's a lot of things you can do to add value, but there's also more more intricate processing for some things that probably would need a bigger workforce and a port system to really make the best of that. So that's what I sort of don't get this the idea where they should be cooperating, and they're not.
Yeah, the whole corridor in Mites, Mount Isa to Townsville Economic Zone is a very complex ecosystem. So I think there's been about $1.6 million spent on the port, but without the rail to support getting the stuff to the port, you're in a bit of strife. Without the copper smelter, we're all in trouble. I think the copper smelter is the key piece of infrastructure that keeps the whole of North Queensland economy going, to be honest with you.
But there's things like vanadium and that and other minerals out there that probably need a more centralised value-adding process further down the track. We're probably not ideal for doing it sort of locally in Mount Isa area. It would be better if the ore was shipped back to a point and then process sort of thing. Now, there's horses for courses. I mean, the people who run those sort of businesses would work that out. But I see the problem with things like Townsville. They've got so engrossed in the Lansdale project and all this new industry that's may or may not eventuate, like green hydrogen and all the rest of it. And they're not sticking to the things that are actually real and tangible now, rather than maybe in the never never.
Bill, we've got a really good example of how we're trying to counter that, which is explored in the roadmap that I mentioned earlier. So, as some of your listeners probably know, sulfuric acid is one of the key products of industry. You can't produce on an industrial scale many products, including the things that we enjoy in our day-to-day lives, like computers and cars, without sulfuric acid being involved in the process. There's a national shortage of it. So in your home state of Western Australia, there's been a few nickel smelters close, which were major suppliers of sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is needed to unlock vanadium. We import a lot of it, but we also produce a lot of it here. There's something near 3,500 tons of acid is scrubbed out of the Mount Isa copper smelter by the attached acid plant here, which is then railed down to the Phosphate Hill mine, where the acid is used to then unlock phosphate from phosphate rock and produce fertilizer. So the reason I mention it is we're working on one of these issues in terms of how do you solve system-wide issues. But in terms of how we're trying to, I guess, support the regions as well, that Phosphate Hill mine, that's a FIFO mine with most of their 400-strong workforce based in Townsville. So to use the analogy of the US sneezes and Australia catches a cold, Mount Isa sneezes and Townsville catches a cold. Our economies are intricately linked. As the mayor mentioned, it's a complex ecosystem out here, and so what we're wanting to do is understand where those reliances are, and how do we explore how do we make them more resilient? How do we build additional capacity? How do we value add out here, so that we're not just shipping raw minerals, but we're value adding, we're increasing the job pool, and as you said, growing the pie.
And also some of the noxious processes you were talking about with people don't want to be doing that over the coast near the Great Barrier Reef. We're set up out here. We've got room for tailings and we've got air monitoring controls and environmental things already in place. So we feel as far as processing goes, this is probably the better place to be actually value adding.
Yeah, that reef can certainly kill off a lot of projects along the coast or even just in the hinterland. So yes, that's one advantage. If you can do your processing out there with the resources you've got, much more advantageous to miss out on the all the rules and regulations in regards to keeping the reef protected.
Yeah, for sure.
Just moving forward, water. what's the situation with water in Mount Isa? What's your main sort of source, and is if you do expand and things like that, what's your reliance going to be on in the future?
We have a lake here, Lake Mundara, that was initially built by the mines, but it's controlled by a state government, I guess, entity, Mount Isa Water Board. So we buy bog water from them. We've got really great quality drinking water here and with high environmental monitoring and standards. We have plenty of water. We also have an allocation at a lake that's towards Cloncurry called Lake Julius. We pay about $1 million a year for that allocation, and we haven't had to pump from there for about 10 years because it's actually quite expensive to pump. The cost of power out here makes it prohibitive to do that. But we're just a bit uncertain about what's going to happen moving forward because the water board's got three main customers: Incitec Pivot, Glencore with the mines, and then ourselves. So with the closure of the underground copper mine, it's not really clear how that's going to impact us to do with the cost of water. But as a group of councils, ourselves and Cloncurry, we're looking at forming our own water entity, the Northwest Water. So we're really advocating to take control of our own water destiny, have those assets handed back to us to make it more affordable for our residents, because we do have the most expensive water in the state.
And electricity.
And
So-
electricity. And airfares, actually.
And airfare. Yeah, you got to
Don't get me started.
Now, all right, I think it's always been an issue that, I mean, you should have been connected to the national grid ages ago. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. But now with CopperString, there's something on the horizon, but there's also an element of sort of spanners in the works too. I think one of the spanners in the work is the escalation in the project cost from the original. I think they were talking, about $5 billion, and I think one of the latest sort of thing is talking about $9 billion. But CopperString isn't just a build for just connecting you to the grid. It's actually the big expense of it is basically because it's designed to hook up a lot of renewables, wind farms and solar farms. If it was just to hook up to the national grid, it would only cost about $460,000 a kilometre. But what they're doing with the costing on that is costing in all the infrastructure to allow the interconnection of solar farms and that at various points and wind farms. So you're getting all the substation costs and all that into the system. Do you think that's a bit unfair that maybe there should be first part is just get the connection going, and the second part is get the rest of it?
Do you want to answer that, Chad?
Well,
Like,
I think
obviously,
it's-
we think, we want to see value for ratepayers as much as anybody else, but it's really future-proofing our area and making these projects that we want to come online affordable. And we've got some great proponents that are actually green energy proponents as well. And we're in, one of the best locations for solar. So for us, it's quite important to be able to add those renewables into the system.
Absolutely. So I think there's no hiding from the fact that the change from a 375 kV to a 500 kV line has increased the complexity and the cost. It's put them at the back of the queue in terms of ordering the appropriate transformers and conductors and all the insulators and all those materials that are in global demand, because every country is racing to electrify, and there's only so many factories in the world that produce all these materials. But for us, connecting to the NEM would be a significant win. It will drive down the cost of electricity for our commercial and industrial users here in Mount Isa. And it will help us get away from the ludicrous situations where you've got diesel gen sets running underneath high voltage power lines because the cost of connecting or the ability to access enough electrons simply isn't available. Like you touched on, Bill, connecting a major city like Mount Isa with the industrial load that it has and the capacity to unlock so much of the the critical minerals that we need to the NEM makes absolute sense. And all levels of government should be supporting projects like this.
Yeah, we were just talking today about a project. We've had someone wanting to come here to recycle tires, like truck tires and mining truck tires for years. And the cost for them for connecting to power is in the vicinity of $20 million. And I mean, they would have a viable business there. It's solving a problem of industry. And we just can't do it because of the power situation. Once CopperString comes along, that'll be a whole different situation.
Well, the price of electricity, if you go back to pre-2007, the cost index for electricity was actually below the CPI. So what it was doing, the price cheap electricity was a downward pressure on the CPI. So it stopped inflation getting away and things like that. Post 2007, electricity costs went above the CPI and have been pulling the CPI up ever since. And that's basically because they committed to Kyoto renewable targets, and we're on net zero and all those. There's nothing in the future that says, looks like where we're going to get to a position where we ever get cheap electricity on the path we are currently on, at least not for some time. And yours isn't a unique problem. I mean, there used to be recycling of PTE plastics in South Australia, and it would have been about 8 or 9 years ago. They actually closed down, and it was the only place in Australia that did it, simply because of power prices. The latest thing to fall over is glass manufacturing in Australia. We don't have much hope if we don't get cheap electricity, if we're going to be competitive. So what do you think the focus should be on in regards to getting cheap electricity? Because it seems to be super critical.
Did you want to talk to the Green Gravity project at all, Chad? Because we've got an MOU with a proponent that's looking at an exciting new, I guess, project here that can use the disused shafts of our copper mine, and they're working with Glencore at the moment to develop this project. And Chad's probably more of an electricity buff than I am, but it's completely green, and down the track it could be circular economy and using our recyclables to develop the weights that they're going to use. So for me, it's one of our more exciting projects. If you want to give the actual details, Chad.
Sure. I'm not going to venture into the debate other than point listeners to the CSIRO's Gen Cost report, which clearly outlines which forms of electricity generation are cheaper than others. In terms of our opportunity with Green Gravity, this is a really exciting project. So Green Gravity is essentially a project where they generate electricity from dropping weights down a shaft, and then during the day, using a solar farm to bring those weights back up. If you think about starting up a new open cut mine, or even an underground venture, the most expensive thing is removing that overburden. So if you've got 2 1-kilometre shafts like the Mount Isa mines lease do, the traditional way would be to look at that as a liability because it's something you have to deal with. But in this case, it's truly an asset. So what Green Gravity are proposing, and they're in discussions with Glencore at the moment, and as the Mayor mentioned, have signed an MOU with Council, is to establish one of these projects in the disused mine shafts outside the footprint of any sort of future operating or mining areas on that lease, because it is a complex lease. There are a few things going on, and I'll use that opportunity to remind people that that facility isn't being wound up, just the underground copper operations. But for us, the Green Gravity opportunity is really exciting in its full form. If it was to maximize out all the shafts that are on the site, you'd be somewhere around 3.5 gigawatt hours of storage, which is multitudes times bigger than the Elon Musk big battery in Jamestown, South Australia, and really provides an additional sort of string to the bow of CopperString, in that there'd be storage capacity at the Mount Isa end, close to where some of the big loads are. It could do all the fancy electrical engineering things that they seek to do with some of the grid scale batteries, like compensating for voltage and for frequency. But for us, it's really interesting in the sense that it has the opportunity to provide transferable job skills. If you've got a bit of machinery operating in a mine shaft, you still need some of those skill sets that are there today. And so it provides an opportunity not just to bring additional storage and green energy generation to the grid, but a direct transfer of skills for some of our highly skilled mine workers.
So that's interesting in regards to, again, it comes into the whole thing that's you've got to have at least a uniform strategy from Townsville to Mount Isa in regards to the whole setup. And next week I'll be interviewing an engineer in regards to the Burdekin Dam Stage 2. And one of the things that weren't originally part of that Stage 2 was pumped hydro. But we look into that because Stage 2 was originally just putting hydro into it, probably around about I think it was originally 500 megawatts, but with today's technology, you'd probably generate a gigawatt with those volumes of water and the space that was allocated to the generators in the dam already. But that depends on raising the wall to the full 14.26 metres above it, and putting a holding dam below the water. Obviously electricity is generated for the Burdekin Dam fall, and then let's pump back from I think it's the Blue Valley Dam if it was ever built back up. So it's the same sort of principle in regards to if you're going to have a network of wind farms and solar farms, you need that extra guarantee in regards to storage, power storage, and that, and that pumped hydro is a huge battery for supporting the whole corridor right through to Mount Isa. And there's probably other opportunities along the way as well that can sort of feed it, but it's like everything. Until there's an overall strategy for each individual region or corridor, we're not going to get the best result if we don't sort of have these strategic meetings and have some people in regards to a bit of know to come up with the best plan, and then heavens forbid someone in Brisbane to at least listen to them.
We've been working with our neighbours in Barkly, as our director was saying before, and we realised they're getting the world's biggest solar project happening there in terms of that whole Sun Cable project. So I think that is 3 times the size of the world's biggest solar project that currently stands when it happens, and that's going to power Darwin and I think it's 15% of Singapore. So it's an amazing project, and it's just over the border there.
Well, it's like a lot of things. We've seen a lot of things fall over time, so it needs deep pockets and a lot of backing. And I think one of the problems is the taxpayers getting a bit weary of their contributions as time goes by.
I think your point around thinking out what is the important infrastructure is a good one, Bill. There's a project at a feasibility study that the Mount Isa region and the Barkly region conducted a few years ago that's sitting with Infrastructure Australia, which is a rail link between Tennant Creek and Mount Isa. Now, I'm not going to go into the pros and cons of the business case, but I think it's really interesting from an infrastructure planning perspective, because let's say that project were to proceed. Once you go through the complexities of land acquisition, negotiating native title, you've got a corridor there which you could run other services. You could bolster the nation's telecommunications capacity while having a long inland fibre optic bundle. You could connect the NEM from the Northern Territory across to Mount Isa when CopperString arrives. you think about the complexity of shifting. Let's say, for example, you've got a series of A1 Abrams that are sitting there at Townsville, and you want to get them to Darwin for an exercise. You've got to ship them down to Melbourne, Melbourne to Adelaide, Adelaide to Alice Springs to Darwin, um, along that long route for something which you could drive in 3 days. So this isn't necessarily about a business case directly providing a return to the taxpayer, but what does the nation value? What does it want to achieve over a long time? And what else can be achieved with that same infrastructure money?
I think we're really sitting at the sweet spot there for the developing Northern Australia as well.
Well, you just said a magic note. This year is the 10th anniversary of the Abbott government's white paper on the development of Northern Australia, and I'm afraid there's not too many flags to wave in regards to what they're accomplished. Or we still get we've still got a minister for Northern Australia, Madeline King's currently, I think. They give a speech once a year, but that's about all we hear about it. But there's also so many groups in that in regards to having a Northern Australian vision. You've got ANDEV, got the Northern Australia Development Conference. It's going to be interesting to when we actually get some tangibles out of these discussions, and that's what always worries me in regards to there's a lot of discussion, but we don't seem to get the tangibles.
Well, we think what the conversation should be about is what levers have the government got to encourage population to move out to these regions, because without population, you can't really develop them. So what we're talking about is developing a special economic zone and what that could look like in terms of tax incentives, in terms of young professionals getting their HECS repaid after they've spent a period of time here, in terms of not having fringe benefits tax on housing and cheap housing for young people. Safeguard exemptions, lower royalties, payroll tax. There's a whole suite of things that the government has within their control to encourage people into the regions.
It still boils down to it all has to be taxpayer driven. I mean, it's either directly subsidising something or foregoing revenue or whatever. What we sort of really hope for is we've got the goods there in the basic infrastructure. The private enterprise comes in and does all this stuff, and knows that it's got to be able to make a buck itself, and it's got good for both the region and them.
Well, I guess paying less royalties isn't taxpayer funded. It's about charging them less so that it encourages them to come out here and spend the money and invest in the
Taxpayer
region.
misses out. It still doesn't matter which way you look. It's some way the taxpayer has to forego it, or they have to deliver it. But look, I think the case in point, like we don't have the visionaries like we did, and I'll always hark back to West Australia in regards to pre-federation. It got self-government in about early 1890s, and John Forrest was the governor, a premier, I should say, and he borrowed £2.5 million. In today's money, that's $40 billion, and built 2 dams, 500 kilometres of pipe, 4 pumping stations, delivered water to Kalgoorlie. Now, that infrastructure is still there. I think Kalgoorlie's delivered a lot more than $40 billion to the Australian economy over the years, and still is. Now, you've got to give it to a person who has that sort of vision. Of course, there was other people amongst that group, to borrow the equivalent of $40 billion when you only had a population of 50-odd thousand people to service it. So here we are in Australia today with $25 million, 25 million people, much more capability of repaying that. But we don't seem to have the fortitude and the forethinking to say, right, let's spend 40 billion in regional Australia to get this pie growing, sort of thing.
I,
And I don't know how we're going to sort of, get the mindset from the people in the capital cities and that to start thinking, well, there's only investing money in the capital cities is only going to get this return. We need a bigger pie. Let's start spending money in the regions. And I suppose that's your job in a degree to make them start thinking about that and delivering for the nation as well.
exactly. The question is, if projects don't go ahead because you don't have I guess the reduction in royalties, or you don't have the tax rebates, or you don't make it a sweet deal for people to want to come out and invest, like, is the taxpayer missing out then? Because rather than not having a reduction in royalties, they're not getting any royalties.
Oh no, there's got to be quid pro quo, but I'm just saying that there needs to be a broader picture, and a position by the government. I guess just building infrastructure like roads a thing uh, is a cost. But like I'm saying, if they saw that as an investment to sort of grow the pie, it would be more helpful than they see it as, no, bloody have to spend more money in the bloody region sort of thing. So that's just my sort of way I look at it, is they don't see the potential that's there because they're not looking for it.
It's short-term election cycles is what it is.
Yes, we certainly don't have any long nation building strategies.
Mhm.
But as we go forward, how hopeful are you in regards to, and what are the key things that you're looking for to sort of deliver this diversification for Mount Isa?
Yeah, as I was saying, we're after that $2 billion to unlock the riches of the Northwest Minerals Province to come primarily from the Future Made in Australia Fund, because we think that, there's not a better place. We've, punched above our weight for the state economy and the national economy for 100 years. Compared to what we, put out annually, it's a small return here, and it could really set us up for the next 100 years. So that's our ask, not just for us. We want that to come into the Northwest Minerals Province, and for us to be a special economic zone to be able to, unlock our riches for the future.
And who in the federal and state government are sort of, are you hoping to sort of champion your cause, or are there groups of people already looking in regards to the mineral province and the impact of the Glencore closure and how to address it?
Look, I think we've got the ear of both the federal and the state government. The state government really understand the position that we're in, and they're taking it very seriously. And we're also looking at putting in for the precincts and partnership funding. There's about $500 million there. And we have a project, the Australian Critical Minerals Industrial Precinct, which is part of our suite of projects identified in our future economy roadmap. So we're hoping to be able to access that funding to be able to get that started. But yeah, we are knocking on every door.
How many people have beaten the feet to get to you, but because that's the show of they're actually really interested, is when they turn up on your doorstep on a regular basis.
Well, we have actually had the Prime Minister and the Premier here so far this year, so it's been a great start to the year.
And the election's coming up, so you might be able to get him again.
And you've got to be optimistic, Bill. If we
Yep.
if we stand flat-footed, if we don't have a plan, we're not going to go anywhere. What we've got is a really clear roadmap. We understand what we're asking for. We talk about here asking for a hand up, not a hand out, and that's exactly what we're approaching the government for.
Well, that's point in case. I mean, the state government should be looking at that too, as in what's good for the state, and be looking out all the time. But it seems to, even when people come up with ideas, they get a lot of roadblocks. I suppose other industries that offer potential is the cotton industry too, because there's been a lot of development in regards to dry area cotton that only needs natural rainfall to survive. It doesn't need irrigation and that's come on leaps and bounds. And I think Northern Territory is sort of really into the cotton industry, or from Townsville out to Mount Isa. There's plenty of potential there. with a little bit of water and a little bit of management to do
We
a
have
lot
that
of.
happening already around Julia Creek, Richmond area.
Yeah.
So that's also in part of our Northwest Minerals province. We have that cotton growing here, and I think they're looking for extra power so they can have a cotton gin down that way as well.
Yeah, I was sort of interested just bringing that up because there was people out near Hewden, no, up past Georgetown, so they're higher up in the region, more into far north Queensland, and they were trying to get a. They're obviously looking at cotton as well, looking at getting a cotton gin, and just run into so many roadblocks in regards to native title and other bits and pieces. You know, just it does sort of put a spanner in the works.
But also they're still
Is
going
that
to
one
need the
of the
same
things?
rail line, CopperString, all of those things that we're advocating
Yeah.
for to unlock the minerals is also going to unlock the cotton industry as well.
But going along with that, do you also hope the regulation burden will be looked at in regards to making sure these projects go ahead fairly without too many hold-ups or obstructions?
Well,
Is
and we
that going to
have
be
down
an
as one,
important
yeah,
part of it?
we have down as one of our things for the special economic zone is speeding up the approvals process. Because we do understand that it takes particularly with a mining project, it can take between 8 to 13 years to get up from, when it first starts to actual production. So yeah,
Okay.
definitely speedy approvals is on the radar.
I think there's a lot of focus now on a desire to see some reduction in red tape, green tape, and black tape, and I mean that will basically help everyone if the governments can come to some sort of realisation that the overload of regulation is such a big drawback for any startup or even existing business to operate most efficiently and profitable.
I think that it is applicable to every level of government. We understand that here at Mount Isa City Council too, and we're trying to streamline our processes to make it quicker for anyone looking to invest in our town as well. So I think we can do that at a council level, and it definitely needs to happen at a state level.
Just before I go, just touch on one other area, housing. How have you found things in regards to the housing level there? Because has it eased because there's a perception that with the mine closing and that things are becoming a bit freed up, or is there still a lot of pressure on housing, or how's your housing situation been?
Look, I would call our housing at the moment very, very affordable. You could come out here and get, a decent little house for around 350,000. Meanwhile, you can get a mining job earning about 150,000. So for a young person wanting to get ahead, this is a great place to come live, work, and even invest because there's still are plenty jobs out here. So yeah, we do call ourselves a city of opportunity, and that still remains true today.
Just on one final note, sell us the lifestyle. I mean, I've driven out to Mount Isa, I've been up to Normanton, I've done the Weaver and things like that, and I've also been across the Nullarbor about 11 times and things like that. And it doesn't enthuse me. So what are the things that enthused you in regards to you come from Central Queensland, you lobbed up there in '97, and you're still there. So what's the key points of the amenity and livability of Mount Isa?
Well, I think you're speaking to the right two people about that. I raised a family here, and Chad's raising a family here now. It's a great place to have kids. They can be involved in anything. There's so many different sporting clubs. We had our sign-on day earlier in the year, and I think we had 88 different community groups and sporting clubs along in one location that families could sign up for, and any new residents. And I think it's the community. We've got a really friendly community that really get involved and look out for one another, and that's probably part of being like a little bit remote. Also, I guess the events, we're well known for having lots of interesting events throughout the year. So, when people say there's not a lot on here, they're really not looking. We have, our rodeo, Cloncurry Rodeo, Quamby Rodeo. If you're into that sort of thing, we've got all our camping. You can go up to Gregory and Lawn Hill, Adele's Grove. Yeah, we have our beautiful granites. We can go out there and, have a bit of cheese and a wine and watch the sunset. So always things to do.
I think for me,
You go,
the other
Chad.
thing is that at night time, you can go out a few miles and just look at the stars too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things that came up really strong, Bill, when we were developing this economic roadmap, is the livability factor and how we can continue to work towards that. So Mount Isa is a remote city. It's not a small town. It's a remote city. You've got your Coles, your Woolies. It's got a Bunnings. Um, it's got the things that you expect in a normal sort of suburban environment, but it's a really diverse culture as well. So we've got the rodeo. Not everyone walks around town with a buckle and a cowboy hat. We've got a really diverse community. There's a really diverse range of cuisine and culture that's here. It's a fantastic place to live. You don't have the commute that you do. Um, as the mayor touched on, we're about to do a reboot of our Discover Mount Isa website just to really sell the benefit of the region, the fact that you can have it all. You can have the job, you can have the house, you can have the lifestyle, and you can work in a really great part of the country.
And visitors are welcome.
Absolutely.
We are actually
Yeah.
part of welcoming
Yeah.
cities,
I think that's the important. I think that's a big important thing for all the remote areas and outback is that they're welcoming and harvest the old grey nomads, and plus the general explorers. So I think that's a very important part of the vista too.
Yeah, we've got some great things to see. We've got a World Heritage area on our back door there with Riversley Fossil Centre. So if you're into, paleontology and into dinosaurs, I know they're not dinosaurs, they're fossils, but it's still really interesting for people to come and have a look at and learn about as well.
Okay, then look, we've gone over the hour. I'd really like to thank you for your time this afternoon. If you could just stay, is there anything you'd like to finish up on?
Not really. I just want to thank you, Bill, for having us on today and giving us the opportunity to tell you all about Mount Isa and our vision for the future and what a great place it is to come and visit or live.
Rightio, Peter, thank you. And Chad, just hold there for a second. I'll just introduce next week's show. If you enjoyed today's show, please like, share, and subscribe to our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Next week, I'll be talking to engineer Richard Cheney. He is a very experienced engineer. Has worked in Canada on dams and tunnels, and heavy engineering, hydraulics, and even high-rise buildings. So he's got a lot of skills and experience. And we'll be talking about stage 2 of the Burdekin Dam in regards to how the opportunity there in the future is for adding a pumped hydro to the stage 2 that would be beneficial for the whole region. So please join me next week for that show. Thank you.